You're listening to Owning the Buy Box, an IP Secure podcast. This is the podcast for agencies, brands, and aggregators who want to master Amazon, push out unauthorized competition, and take their business to the next level. You're about to hear a conversation that'll help you maximize your growth on Amazon by owning the Buy Box. Let's get into the show.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Owning the Buy Box. I'm your host, Dave Cooper. I'm also the CEO and the founder of IP Secure. On Amazon in particular, it's a very competitive environment. And there are a variety of different product categories, competing for consumer eyeballs on the platform. And one industry in particular is really the small appliance, the personal appliance market. And I read this recently, but the personal ice maker market is projected to be, $4.7 billion by 2030. So on the show today, I'm really excited because we have New Air, and New Air is definitely a market leader and innovator in the space. And joining us today is Jessalyn Henry from New Air. She's the head of e-commerce and brand management, and we're super excited. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
I'm sort of riveted by your products because I think people don't realize that they've probably bought one, owned one, have one, used one, right? Otherwise interacted with one.
Yeah, I always say it's like, when you buy a white car and then you see the same white car everywhere you go. Once you know New Air and you know to look for us, you'll see it everywhere.
Yeah, it's true. I just cleaned out like my garage the other day, and I have some older kids now, and there was a small New Air refrigerator that was in there, and it was actually still in the box, which was sort of frustrating for me because I'm like,
you got to use it.
I know. Well, the whole point of the garage clean out was to find all his stuff, right? Because I was like, dude, you have a lot of stuff at our house and you don't live here anymore, so you need to take it back. And sure enough, there was a little, New Air fridge in there. It's still in the box. I couldn't believe it. It was pretty incredible. So, I'm glad that you decided to be a guest. I think, you've got a lot of experience in the space, obviously. And before we get into sort of, Amazon and the buy box and the brand protection elements and of it, I know that part of your role is overall brand management. And I'm just curious how important is Amazon in your view to the brand, sort of beyond the sales, beyond the mechanics, right, of how important Amazon is to the bottom line. What's your perspective on how critical it is just to your brand and the health of it?
Yeah, so brand management is incredibly important, I think, actually, for any company, whether it be big or small. Brand can encompass so many things, right? You want people to know your brand the moment they see it. And like you've already said, that's something we're working on because a lot of people have seen New Air, have even had it in their homes or their garages and haven't even noticed that they were using New Air as a brand. So I've really been working on finding ways to create that brand loyalty. But then the other part of brand management is definitely protecting our brand, making sure that nobody is masquerading as part of our brand or an authorized seller and giving anything that could be faulty or, not working properly or maybe misadvertising the product.
I agree completely. We've had guests on that talked about the importance of, their content, right, on Amazon and like controlling the content, because we know that I think it's 61% of all product searches or something. It's some, massive number, all start on Amazon. So even if they're not like ready to buy at that exact moment in time, they're probably going to start their due diligence there, right? Thinking about what they want to buy. And to me, it just seems like really logical that you'd want to control the content that those consumers are going to see on the world's most popular, product investigation platform, if you will,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Totally. I can't tell you how many times I talk to people and they're like, well, I just bought it. And like, there's products that people have less affinity for specific brands, and they want to solve a function, right? So they go on Amazon to look for those functions. And I did a whole blog piece on this called, like, most of us are not Nike, right? Like, most of us live in a world where, we're solving that function, that need. And so I think the brand awareness becomes super critical because it could help you differentiate from the pack when there's, 50 other similar type appliances that might be available.
Especially when we're, in that mid-size company where we're very large, we're distributed, all over, we're in, all the big name stores. But then you have that situation of, okay, but we're still up against, some of those huge name brands that everyone knows, right? Like Samsung or, whatever it may be. So it is a delicate balancing act of growing that brand affinity by education add, by value add, and really pointing out those features that we have that maybe we're the only ones who have had it, we've innovated it, or that we do better than some of our competitors or people who are selling similar products.
Yeah, I mean, I was just reading about the Luke Peters, right, who started
Yeah,
the company, I think, and I don't know how accurate the article was, but it said he started it 15 years ago from his garage.
he did. He started it with his wife. And in fact, they just told us the story how his wife was like so into making sure that the business worked that she chased a FedEx truck down while she was like super pregnant to make sure a package got out on time. So they were very dedicated, worked really hard together to build such an incredible business.
Yeah, I love that story, right? That's, you know, that really, and for Amazon, for all its faults and for all the frustrations that people may feel it brings to the table, it really has created this ecosystem where, millions of people, right, have created businesses and a living. Some have gotten rich, some have just, made a good living, whatever the case may be, but it's created this massive ecosystem of people. And I love hearing, stories like that, because I just think it's really cool. What other platform in the world would enable you to reach thousands and millions of potential customers, right, through targeted technology on a 24/7 basis with the most competitive price? And then, by the way, help you get the product there in record time. I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think that a lot of times, we as consumers can forget that there are people behind these brands and they all started somewhere. And a lot of them have really incredible stories or incredible people. And I think that that is actually becoming more popular with some of the younger generations to research the why behind the company, the abouts, and understanding, they're wanting to buy for altruistic reasons as well as the consumerism side.
Oh yeah, more so than ever before, right? Yep. Yeah. Sustainability is a big part of it, and I guess your views on important topics of the day are relevant. It's not just can you give me the best price. That seems to be probably less relevant. It's interesting. We see a lot of unauthorized sellers now that really target brands that are not paying attention to some of those elements quite as much. And I think part of that is because they know that they can blend in quite easily, and take advantage of the fact that that business isn't really trying to reach out and communicate with their customers as much as they can, through every possible channel. Um, so tell me about, your experiences maybe with Amazon and brand protection. I know you said you've kind of gone through all sorts of emotions around the topic, so I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so I've been working in the e-com space for 12 years now. I started out, when it was still quite new, and starting off on Amazon, right? Towards the beginning, if you remember, Amazon was more of like that third party, like eBay type site. And then it became this like insane powerhouse. And so, on the starting ground, the unauthorized sellers wasn't as big of an issue because we didn't really see it in its full fruition yet. But now, like starting, I remember I think like 2015 was like the first time I really figured out map pricing and needing to
Right.
put map pricing agreements in. And I started that in like 2014 and 2015. I noticed, we're having these issues where we're selling to all these big name like wholesalers, and they're taking our product and they're owning the buy box, and they are taking our sales, and they are taking our customers, and they're building brand affinity off of our product. So that was when I worked for Lazy One in an apparel company. So it was a very easy thing for people to buy a very low cost item, and then they were just doing all this advertising and taking all of our sales. So I learned about map pricing and started to implement that with our wholesalers. We lost a lot of wholesalers. They were not happy with us, but ultimately you have to do what's protective of your brand. Like we talked about, if you don't protect your brand, that's how you get into trouble. And then, moving on into vitamins and supplements, there's, a dime a dozen, and vitamins and supplements is something you have to be very careful of, right? Because if you get the counterfeits, you could really, end up hurting someone eventually. And so we had to also look into brand gating and protecting our brand, being that we were, one of the top 10 sellers on Amazon.
Yeah, that's probably one of the few benefits you get when you sell in some of those restricted categories, right? Is their willingness to stop the bleeding, if you will, and
Yes.
actually control who's going to show up and sell your ingestible vitamin. That makes sense. I can appreciate. I think it's much harder for the folks, as you know, that are in other areas.
Now with newer with appliances, it's a little harder to do stuff like brand gating because it's very easy to counterfeit. I shouldn't use the word easy. It tends to be uh, easier to skate by on counterfeit electronics because they're readily replicable, and so we have to be careful there. And then we would have wholesalers who would buy up a lot of our product when they were on sale, and then they would turn around and sell those and beat us out at the buy box because we weren't running that sale anymore. And then also we'd have situations with warranties where we sell a warranty on our site, we have that 1 year warranty, but because they weren't authorized sellers, we weren't able to give that 1 year warranty unless it was an actual newer product.
All super common issues that manifest themselves, right? As you're struggling to deal with these unauthorized sellers, you sort of keep finding these use cases. And then I guess the real question is then, do you turn around then and beef up your own agreements? Right? Do you start making changes, right, to your own business? I think to your point, like if you got to cut off a distributor, you do it. If you've got to put a policy in place, then you do that, right?
Yeah, and that's what we've had to do is we had to sit down and we had to think, okay, what are we going to do to fix this situation and to stop this problem, to stop the bleeding, so to speak. So we implemented a reseller agreement, sent it out to all of our wholesalers, and asked them to fill it out.
Okay. And how did that process go? I mean, I think were there some that were like, we're not doing this?
Yes, we had several who were very upset because, for so long, New Air wasn't really so much focusing on that aspect of it. And then, they decided they came to me and our marketplace lead and we're like, okay, look, we've got to fix this situation if we're going to succeed the way we want to on Amazon. So we sent that out, and wholesalers have been skating by for, 2 years, 3 years doing this. And now they're like, oh, now we're playing hardball. They didn't love it, but at the end of the day, we don't really miss their money. as bad as that sounds, because it's helping us in the long run and it's cleaning up our listings and making sure that we're getting that good, reputable product to our customers in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, you also obviously see a margin increase, right? When you're, you're really, I don't, diverted is the wrong word, but you're channeling those sales back to a lower cost, more efficient, sort of healthier channel. So that has all sorts of benefits from the bottom line all the way through to the brand management aspect that we talked about. So kudos to you guys, because I think it's a hard thing for businesses to do sometimes. Especially businesses that have been around a while and, like you said, are, they just get used to it. It's how they do business. And all of a sudden you have to change. And it's not so easy to do that all the time.
That's exactly right. It's 100% correct. It is a lot of work. We're still dealing with it. We're sending out those emails through a third party. And now, after we sent out the initial email from a personalized email, now we're using a third party to send those out every time an unauthorized seller comes up.
Right, right. So you almost have to like build a process that, because it never stops. It's not like you go and you clean it up and it's all good forever. The product category you sell in is always going to continue to get more competitive, probably not less. And so you have to monitor it on an ongoing basis as well.
Yeah, and it would take too long with how many marketplaces we're on, including Amazon, and how many listings we have. It would take us, we'd have to have someone dedicated 100% of the day just to watching our listings.
Yeah, I completely understand. I totally understand. Do you guys ever take advantage? I think you mentioned some of the programs at Amazon, like brand registry, transparency. What are your thoughts on some of those tools?
I've used them in the past and they're really good when you can get them set up properly. But, as you stated, sometimes Amazon's not super easy to work with in regards to those programs. And we've been really successful so far with our third party that we have set up where, they're able to track all of that for us in one, place. And then we go in and we decide, if we want to whitelist somebody or whatnot. But I mean, those programs are really fabulous and have a lot of fantastic features, but they can be difficult to understand if you haven't used them before. Hard to sometimes get a hold of customer service. If you feel like spending a couple hours on the phone and offering to bake someone cookies, you can sometimes get the answer you're looking for. But
Sure. or and then it changes too. Like, policies and processes change, and Amazon in particular, it's not like they send out a global alert when one of those changes happens, right? You just all of a sudden the thing you did before doesn't seem to work anymore.
Exactly. 100%. It's one of the, I mean, in e-commerce in general, you just always have to be learning and paying attention and joining as many webinars as you can and listening to those, listening to podcasts and just trying to keep up on all of the changes.
Something I ask a lot of the guests that come on, since really the sort of bottom line, right, of the show is really owning the buy box, right? And that's such a critical component of your e-commerce operation. I'm just curious, based on your experience, what are the primary reasons people do lose the buy box? Irrespective of authorized sellers, and maybe that's one of the reasons. But are there others generally that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I would say not paying attention to promotion opportunities. Everyone has to make the decision for themselves on certain promotions if that will hurt their margin or not. But those can be extremely beneficial to gaining the buy box back if you've lost it and kind of helping yourself out there. Making sure your listing is really well up to date, A plus content, adding all of that in will always help you. And then just keeping an eye on competitive data, making sure that you're priced competitively and within margins. Shipping costs, that can be a big one too, especially, in New Air. I know we have such big items that can be a concern. But so I think that that's something that you really have to pay attention to as well.
You already know your success relies on your Amazon sales growth, and that means beating counterfeiters and illicit sellers to the buy box. But do you have all the tools you need to do so effectively? IP Secure offers seller intelligence to understand and root out unauthorized sellers and push them out of the buy box through simple enforcement actions that actually work, meaning customers will only see your legitimate products and shop from your authorized sellers. Learn how at ipsecure.com.
We see a lot of sellers that show up and have a great price well below MAP, but charge 3 times more for shipping.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So that's a kind of a fairly common tactic that we see pretty frequently. I'm curious too. Like, do you see a lot of unauthorized activity from China, from overseas? I mean, like to your point earlier, in a lot of the product categories where you're competing, there's a ton of like sort of, I don't know, generic brands, we'll call them, right? Especially on Amazon, where you see some of them are native, Amazon brands, but some of them are just, foreign companies like spinning up trademarks so they can get in brand registry. And next thing you know, the guy's store is a garbly-gook of letters. So do you guys see a lot of that kind of activity?
Honestly, to be transparent, our marketplace lead would have a little bit better of a handle on that
Sure.
answer for me, but I can tell you 2 things. One thing is that we have to be very careful. I know with our factories, for instance, we just went to a show and we saw the exact same model on someone else's booth that we have. So I think it's important to keep in touch with your manufacturers to make sure that there's some loyalty or exclusivity there to prevent that from happening. And then the other thing I was going to tell you, I just read a very interesting article on how ChatGPT is going to really affect this side of the market for Amazon. It was saying that these counterfeits, they were always very easily detectable because the descriptions or the information was clearly like translated into kind of English that was very easy to detect. But now with ChatGPT, it's looking like it's going to be a huge rise in counterfeits being pushed through to the market at an easier rate because they're going to have more readable and accessible descriptions and key features and be able to speak in a more discernible English pattern.
That's fascinating to me. Scary, but also quite
Terrifying.
fascinating. So basically what you're saying is like their ability to sort of replicate what looks like authentic content gets a lot better, right? Because of this AI technology. And so, if they through AI can pump out, let's say, hundreds of properly formatted product descriptions, A+ that you'd expect to see on Amazon, that's really going to help them, right? Create things that are indistinguishable for consumers. I think, yeah, I mean, what I always found super interesting about Amazon is they've removed all the friction. They basically have made it so easy for people to buy products that the minute you think about it, you open the app. I even have that like buy it now thing where I don't even have to do anything, just swipe it, and all of a sudden
That's
I own
dangerous.
It's on the way. And this carousel structure, which I kind of view them as really being the pioneers of, where the product listing is the constant thing that's nurtured and cared for. It's the sellers that are rotating in and out. It's the buy box. And I know Walmart replicates a similar structure, but most other platforms don't, like eBay, Alibaba, all these other ones, right? You have a seller with a product listing and a product. So you wind up with a lot of duplicate product listings from different sellers. However, it's unequivocal in terms of your understanding of who's committing the infringement.
Yes.
Right? Amazon's completely blurred the lines and in some ways, they're forcing you to build a storefront, leave the door unlocked, and let anybody that they choose walk in your storefront and sell your product. And that's a massive reputational risk on top of everything else. And it's absolutely genius. It's utterly genius.
It's a great way to make money.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic. It's exactly why Walmart's replicated, that kind of structure. But it also makes sense. Like, why would you want to have duplicate products on your platform? And like, if you sell it, you sell it, and you probably want to have one. But it does make brand protection incredibly challenging. For years, Amazon would not take action against really anything. Right. And then eventually, public forum, then brand registry. Next thing you know, they're got a counterfeit crime unit and they're taking people down. But that's why we tend to focus on Amazon. It's really intriguing because it's the most important platform from an e-commerce standpoint. It's also the most difficult one to police and keep clean. I work with a lot of agencies and I see what they go through and I'm like, dude, your job is hard. Like, yours is too. There's so many moving parts to Amazon. So many software systems and tools and knowledge that you need that it's really, I come from the legal world and now I'm really hyper focused on e-commerce, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for people who do what you do, because you really have to be an incredible multitasker.
Yeah. Well, and also you have to, to your point, you have all these people who are like behind DBA, behind DBA, behind DBA. So even if you know who your wholesalers are, sometimes it can take a lot of investigative work. Like sometimes I feel like I'm in the FBI when I'm like trying to find out
Right.
who this wholesaler is. I have to, look up names, and I'm looking up addresses and maps and
You're
just trying to
crawling
figure out who it
in
is.
corporation records in Mississippi or
Yeah.
something. Like, yeah, I totally got it. I know. It's incredible. It's created a web of anonymity and made it just so easy for people to spin up these businesses. And I think, counterfeits gets all the focus, right? I mean, I spent 20 years at a company where we worked exclusively with IP attorneys on counterfeiting primarily, and companies are willing to spend almost any amount of money really to help prevent, if they can, that problem. But on Amazon, counterfeits are a very small percentage of what you see. What you really see is massive amounts of gray market product. Um, and it's authentic. And if it's authentic, the bottom line is they're not super excited about removing it, or removing the seller who's offering it. But it has these massive consequences for your business, right? Because this guy's undercutting you on price. You can't run marketing. You sort of lose control of your buy box. And next thing you know, your sales are going down. And it's a tough problem to solve.
Yeah, that's why we've implemented, so we've gotten our wholesalers to sign that reseller agreement that essentially says they're not going to sell on third-party marketplaces. But then when they don't adhere to that, we send them a notice. If they don't take the products off, we send them a second notice. If they don't take the products off after that, then we send out the cease and desist. And so even that though can get expensive and time consuming, but it's a necessity if we really want to take our business to the next level and make our brand, a clean brand that people know, like we're giving you what you need, because like you said, it is authorized product. These people got it from us, but now we've got to do our part to make sure that, we're making sure that they're selling it where they say they're going to sell it to whom they say they're going to sell it to.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough thing to do, but you need to have that discipline to do it. Otherwise, you lose control of all of those elements. Um, so it sounds like you have a pretty robust program in place. I mean, have you seen the problem get better, or I should say smaller? Has the problem gotten smaller for you over time since you've been instituting all these changes?
I think it's definitely helping. We had one brand in particular that, was just crushing us on so many listings. And then once we got rid of them, they're not even buying from us anymore. And actually, I found out that they just completely got out of that particular category completely. So It definitely is helping, but for every one that's we get rid of, there's more popping up, or we're figuring out who they are. And some are always going to be really smart and stay hidden, and we may never figure out who they are, but as few as we can get on our listings, the better. We are getting emails back all the time of them complying and removing the listings that we asked them to remove. So I do know that it's working, and it's helping us in some way, shape, or form, to make our brand a little more, cleaned up, and where we're owning that buy box.
Yeah. One of the things that we see a lot through the work I do, kind of my day job at IP Secure, is when we analyze people's problem and we kind of begin to put them into those use cases, what we realize is the majority of what's impacting them are things that they actually can control on some level, because it's not counterfeits usually. For some it is, and that's an unfortunate problem. And you drop the hammer, you kind of aggressively, I think, pursue that content and those sellers to the best of your ability. But what we find is it's usually, non-compliant dealers or old distributors, or, there's all sorts of flavors of it, but it's product that came from your supply chain. And so we can impact that by changes in our own behavior and how we sell and all that, and how we interact with our consumers. And so it's not as insurmountable a problem as people think. Um, the other thing we do a lot is we track how much revenue we think people are taking from us on each and every listing. And I think that's uniquely eye-opening, because even for brands I work with that have hundreds of unauthorized sellers flying around, the reality is a small percentage of them are taking significant revenue. The rest of them are there, they pick off a sale here and there, but there'll be this kind of core group that knows how to really work the Amazon system to win that buy box on a more consistent basis. And so when we remove the noise, you realize, well, I don't have to get rid of 200 sellers. I have to get rid of, 10. And if I get rid of those 10, I reduce my problem by, 2/3 probably. To your point, right? You got rid of the big fish and all of a sudden things look pretty good.
Yeah, and I think too, you have to realize, because when I started this with our marketplaces, it felt like a really big task, but you realize, like you said, like eventually they're going to run out of that product. So if you focus on your distribution of these products to the wholesalers and really investigate these wholesalers, checking their domain authority on their website, right? If they're selling on their website actively and making enough sales to be reordering from you once a week, their domain authority is not going to be a 1. And they're more than likely their DBA, is not going to be some random DBA that houses several brands. So eventually, those small sellers, like you said, they're going to run out of the product, that you sold them unnecessarily, we'll call it. And then, then you can focus moving forward on who you're giving those orders to, who's ordering a lot. That's who I really focus on. Like if I see a wholesaler that's ordering a ton of like one certain product, then I know to kind of keep an eye on them, and make sure that we're stopping that situation from the beginning of their relationship with us.
That's smart. That's super smart. Because the data doesn't lie, right? You see anomalies in that information. You're like, all of a sudden they go from ordering this much to ordering this much. And it happens to be, a product that, was discounted in another place. Dots, I guess, start to get connected, right?
Yeah, well, and also, so if they are saying that they're, want to bulk buy, we're checking, and they're wanting to drop ship, right? And if they're wanting to drop ship versus bulk buy, that's also a red flag to me, because they're getting off scot-free for a much cheaper situation. They're not having to house that inventory. They're able to sell it for much cheaper on Amazon because they don't have a warehouse space. So we're really focusing on more of those bulk buys or an upfront buy. And most of our wholesalers that we're onboarding now, we're requiring a much bigger buy. Before we had zero minimum order to start, and that's where our problem lied. We were like, okay, you can just drop ship. But then that's how we were finding out all these people were like Amazon sellers. So now by eliminating that drop ship option for most of our wholesalers, we're eliminating that Amazon problem as much as possible from that end as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too, right? It's not only how much they're ordering, but how do they sell and how do they deliver the product? Because we just know, right, that some of those techniques, while I think have really legitimate uses as well, or also have a bunch of other uses. So those are good red flags I would think to look out for. So, I mean, considering how long you've kind of been in this space, if we just met at a party or something and I was telling you that I launched a new Amazon brand and it seems to be going pretty well, what are some of the maybe one or two or three things that you would suggest to me, like, Dave, these are the things, if you're going to be successful, and kind of protect your brand on Amazon, that I think you should do?
So register your brand. A lot of these third-party sellers that aren't brands, they're not registering a brand, and that is a great catalyst for protecting your product. And if it's not your product that you own, if you're hopping onto someone else's listing,
Yeah, maybe
bundling.
I'm just a reseller. I'm a reseller.
Yeah, I have a friend who does that. He's an authorized reseller, but what he does is he's created a brand based off of bundling. So he'll take something from a brand and he'll sell a pack of two, and that's his brand. Or he'll like kit something from three different brands and therefore makes his own brand and is able to register his brand, have a storefront, and do A+ content. So
That sounds like
that's
a smart way to do it.
yeah, it's just really smart, and a lot of sellers are capable of doing that and just don't know that that's available, and it's a great way to own the buy box on your own listing because it is depending on the product, but it is, a possibility to do bundles and make a lot of money that way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, if as long as you're an authorized seller, there's nothing wrong with being creative about your own identity, about how you deliver products. And also, like you said, it differentiates you enough so that it opens up capabilities that you didn't, like having your own storefront, right? And that just helps because you're legitimate. You want to be legitimate. I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, and then the other one would definitely be like we spoke about paying attention to those promos. Obviously, if you're, a wholesaler and you're getting from someone else, you have to check your margin on that. But promotions, even short run promotions, can really boost your visibility in a listing very quickly. And, there are even really small promotions. I was reading a study the other day that even just like a $1 coupon can give you like a 15% lift if you run it for like 2 weeks. And that's like, it's hardly anything off of your margin, but if it's going to give you a lift and you're going to get a lot of sales, then there could be a really good return on investment there. So I like to tell people to really pay attention to promotional opportunities when it's right for their company. You have to be smart and do the math, because you can lose a lot of money on promotions, as we all know. Lightning deals, you get excited, you get accepted into a lightning deal, and you're not paying attention to your margins. And then the other one is just making sure that, you're staying up to date on your listings. So, videos or reviews or, staying competitive with the value add that and the offering on your listings is really important, as well as, your keywords, in that area. And then, like we talked about, your shipping and pricing, making sure that you're staying competitive there as well.
I think especially if you're a brand, right?
Yes, especially if you're a brand.
Yeah. And I also think, how do you feel about hybrid sales motions? Like it depends on who you talk to. Some people still think, 1P through Amazon is the way to go, although costs are increasing rapidly, right? Or, I'm 3P, I'm doing it a lot of, I'm doing more work myself, or I'm going to go to an agency, or I'm a hybrid. I'm both. Any thoughts on just generally what you think works for you?
Yeah, we're a hybrid situation and it works out really well for us. But our marketplace lead is like constantly on the phone with Amazon, just like it's, just crushing it, making sure that we are staying really up to date on how to make those two things meld together, how to make them complementary, not competitive. And I think that that's the biggest situation there. But you can do very well doing both. But again, like you said, those fees are really increasing on the 1P side. So you got to make sure that it's worth it for you and that you have that margin available. So like my friend I was talking about does both, but then realized that 1P wasn't doing great for his margins, switched over to the 3P like as a whole, and his sales have just skyrocketed, have done so much better. His margins have shot through the roof. So I think it really is on a case by case basis, which I know sounds like a cop out, but without knowing your product and the amount of space it takes up in the warehouse, its shelf life, all of these things contribute to your costs and whether or not it's worth it for you to do the hybrid model.
Yeah, it's a very personal thing, right? Based on all sorts of factors, from your cost structure, your margins, to the type of product that you're selling. I mean, the list goes on. The resources that you have available, right? I think some people, want to lean on Amazon as much as possible, just because they don't necessarily have, right, the expertise, the capability in house to do some of those functions. So it's super interesting. Jessalyn, this has been a really great conversation.
Thank you.
I think it's been great. I think New Air is really cool. I think, in the space that you're in, clearly, you are taking the lead and aggressively trying to take steps to really cultivate New Air's brand and your relationship with your consumers. And Amazon is the tip of the spear for that. And so I think sharing your experiences and your thoughts has been really helpful, and I think they're lucky to have you. If anybody wanted to reach out, contact you, ask you questions, I mean, as long as that's okay with you, how would they? What is, like, LinkedIn the best way, or what would be the best way to do that?
Or they could always send me an email. It's Jessalyn, JESSALYNN @newair.com. I'd be happy. I could talk about this all day. When you were like, "Oh, thanks for coming," I was like, "Oh, it's over already." I could talk about this all day. I love e-com.
You covered a ton.
Yeah, I've loved it.
That's all the time that we have for today. It's been a great discussion with Jessalyn. Again, we're owning the buy box. I'm Dave Cooper. I'm your host. I'm also the CEO and founder of IP Secure. Check out our podcast. It's the fastest growing podcast in the world, focused on protecting your brand and revenue on Amazon. You can find us on Spotify, Google, and every major platform where all your podcasts are. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to Owning the Buy Box, a show from IP Secure. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. Please give us a rating, leave a comment, and share episodes that you love. That helps us keep delivering you the tools you need to sharpen your competitive edge and ensure your authorized sellers always own the buy box. We'll see you next time.